The self-employed estate agency dream and the bit that they don't talk about. Today, I'm joined by Ian Wilkinson, who is boss man of Agent MXM. And he's here to talk to me about the potential nightmares of being a self-employed estate agent. Ian, thanks for joining me today. What are those nightmares? Talk to me.
So I think, first and foremost, I think the self-employed brokerage model is a fantastic way to go for agents. I think there's so much potential. I think that the lifestyle, but it's not all roses like any business really, because ultimately, although you're joining a business that's got structure in place for you and you've got help and guidance along the way, you're still starting a business in an environment where starting a business isn't that easy. So I think it's about, you've always got to think of the long game, begin with the end in mind. You've got to be thinking, okay, where do I want to be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? And I think you've got to accept that, yes, you might get your first completion that pops in early. You might get a great deal that pops in month 3 or 4. But I think in reality, it's a bit longer than that. So you start to get that consistent cash flow of a business, and it could be a year or longer before you get in that sort of regular, predictably what you're going to be doing each month. So I think it's a great opportunity for agents, but I think you should go into it with their eyes open that, yes, all this structure is available for you, but there are some quicker wins, but in reality, until you've got a predictable business, it's a bit longer.
Do you think we as an industry, or those within the self-employed model who are probably trying to promote it, highlight that enough?
Probably not. In some cases they do. I've seen a few quite honest sort of posts about
vulnerability, yeah,
which I quite like, and I guess this is part of that, because I think that there are many highlight reels to being a self-employed estate agent, and we see a lot of these highlight reels and some of the agents that went from fairly standard office roles to being top earners. But yeah, maybe we don't talk about this enough because it's not in the marketing. It's not the sort of shiny, come and do this, you learn this, and there's no downsides. It's not in the whole marketing pack. Whereas I think it's important because you're entering into a partnership with somebody when they're joining your self-employed brokerage, and it has to be sort of, everyone needs to know where they stand, that you are setting up a business.
Where do you think most agents go wrong with all this patience and playing the long game?
I think exactly that. It's patience and playing the long game. I think that if you don't get your quick wins, it's easy to become disheartened. And I think that self-employed agency, like a lot of businesses, follows this sort of cycle of you first launch to this sort of, the initial launch is a bit of a fanfare because all your friends and family have seen it. You've got your initial sort of, group of people, and I believe that in most cases the first instruction is in your phone. It's that first group of people, and I think that that's probably your first sort of month or so, and then once you're outside of that initial sphere or group of people, I think that's when it starts, maybe reality starts kicking and it starts to become a bit tough. So that's when you've got to sort of fall back on your systems, and you've got to be doing those religiously, whatever your day, week and month jobs are. But I think that if you're not seeing the immediate, if you're doing however many leaflets, social media posts, whatever you decide to do, and you're not seeing that immediate, hey, I want you to come and sell my house, then that's where the mindset comes in of people that have got to sort of keep pushing through that.
You're a self-employed model. You have 6, including yourself. Can you see, it's interesting you use the word systems. And that is a phrase that an awful lot of self-employed brokerage bosses like yourself say, that the big difference is mindset and systems. Almost saying, someone's worked for a corporate, hasn't done any business generation for the last 3 years because they're a glorified show pony and they just turn up on the sofa. Can you tell whether someone's going to be successful or not, even before you bring them on? Through their, or have you been surprised that they talk the talk but actually and not actually walk the walk?
I've not been surprised that way. I've been surprised by people that have, not surprised, people that have come into the industry having not been an agent before, because we really sat on the fence about this at the start. But then we took our second agent in, Lauren, came in, who hadn't been an agent before, and so had none of the baggage of agency. So she just set off and running. She was like, okay, well, that's what I'm going to charge. That's what I'm going to charge. Like, there's no mindset of, well, actually, I'll never get that, or they won't pay that in my area. So but she was super like structured in terms of the way that she works. So it's just like she's like layered these things into her day, week, and month to sort of slowly get her business stepped up. So I think that when I first sat down with her, I vaguely knew her through some connections. And when I first sat down with her, it was this conversation of someone that's like, okay, this person seems super driven. They understand that actually, you know, they're not going to wake up tomorrow morning and order a brand new Ferrari. It's going to take a bit longer. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey on that front.
Interesting that you say that someone from outside the industry is better. I've heard that quite often, that, you know, they make great, a lot of people, not everyone, make great self-employed estate agents. Because as you say, they haven't got the package. Do you think choosing the right brokerage is important? Of course you're going to say yes, but go on.
I absolutely do. And I think that there's the amazing thing about the self-employed brokerage model. I mean, obviously we're literally, we just turned one, so we're 1 year old. So, you know, there's brokerage that is obviously that are much older than that. And I think that there's and the great thing about this industry is you're now seeing the different versions of brokerages and different sort of elements of what they offer. And I think it's really quite important. And I think that any agent that's considering it should talk to the biggest brokerages, should talk to the smallest brokerages, and find the place that they sit and most comfortable with them. What are your thoughts on the different brokerages and whether agents should shop around?
I get asked an awful lot from people because they know damn well I don't take any commission from anyone. I think 80% of your choice should be based on the one-to-one relationship that you're going to have with that brokerage. And we're not talking about the boss. We're talking about the person who's going to be your point of contact, your accountability partner, your driver, your coach, your mentor, whatever you call them. That should be 80%. 80% of your choice should be based on that and that alone. Just because one self-employed model is bigger than another doesn't mean you're going to be more successful. Do remember, an awful lot of self-employed models are incentivized to bring people on. I think, you know, if you're someone's going to be sponsoring you, you've got to ask, what am I getting in return? The horror stories I've heard, they're basically saying, I'll be your sponsor, and then that person goes into witness protection. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's other things like the market, the support, the marketing, everything goes with it. There aren't really any bad ones out there. You just got to go with the one that you feel feels right for you. And again, most of that decision should be on that one-to-one relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because it's the intangible almost, really, because you can there are charts that you can find, and you see in some of the Facebook groups of people that, you know, fees, costs, all these different things, but actually the intangible thing of sat down having a brew with somebody.
That's what it's all about. I mean, let's be honest, the self-employed model is a cheap way to start your own estate agency. You give 30% or whatever away up to a certain amount or no amount, depending on which model. And in return, you haven't got to spend 3 or 4, 5 grand a month on Rightmove, Zoopla, CRMs from day one. That's the deal, really. The number of agents then who get up to, you know, flying status and then could work out that it's actually cheaper to buy their own Rightmove. Well, that's one option. What you've got to ask yourself is, what are you getting in return from the brokerage? And this is where, you know, that's not a problem that, you know, some of the larger ones have, is how do you retain the people? Now, of course, there are some models where you get the, you know, like commission or kickbacks. Don't say that in a bad way. I've got a problem with that. How do you keep those people? One is, I said, with some golden handcuffs. There are other ways to do that as well. You just got to do what's right for you, really.
Yeah, I agree.
Ian, thank you for your time today.
Good to see you.